Really weird. Okay. This is really weird. Backwards. So I'm still, full disclosure, I'm still working on my fifth hub practice in the creating and building. And I'll specifically say that there is what I'm experiencing right now with finding the messaging and the words is and this has been kind of a sticking point, is really stepping into them in a particular way. And yeah, so I'm working on that, and I'm also beginning the fourth hub practice. So it's still like for me right now, this creating and building, and just as a like a refresher, if you're following along, the steps that we've followed are the inquiry, the receptivity, working with limiting beliefs, continuing to clarify the vision, and then tracking your connection to what it is that you're building as it relates to who you are and the expression of that and how it relates to your story. And then we did exercises with finding the messaging. So in those first two hubs, the seventh and the sixth, as we're descending, there's a lot about landing a vision. And then in the fifth hub, there's the clarification of it. It's like being able to articulate it and connect it with other people, as that's this really kind of largely unspoken component of, what's traditionally called manifestation, is that manifestation means that it's trying to bring your build something into the collective reality. And that's where like the stepping over into what we're doing right now, which is I'm going to talk a little bit about like the collaboration and some of this initial setup for team building, is the beginning of like of bringing other people in, and how that represents increasing the densification of it, of bringing something into reality. And by reality, I mean shared reality, so other people are experiencing it and connecting with it. So yeah, so I will say that I'm really in this process of considering what it means to speak really openly. One of the things that is, I am not a short form communicator, as you can see in these videos. So part of what I'm working on figuring out is like how I work with that and how I refine that and what that means. And there is also like an aspect of this that's still related to the sixth hub, with the increasing clarification of figuring out what something actually is, which isn't a one, it's like iterative. So there's that. So anyhow, yeah. So, so for my elevator pitch, talking about what Parinama is, I actually had a meeting yesterday with someone, and they were asking what it is. And part of what, and this is actually, there's so many things. I've done a lot of this in my career and life. So I have like a lot of different like hot takes on aspects of this. One of the things is realizing who is actually the audience, and being able to recognize that, because testing stuff out on people who are not really like going to, like just who aren't the audience, their reactions can help shape like your messaging and your consideration of what you're doing, when it's like kind of, I don't know, needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that meeting with somebody who is yeah, I actually don't want to say what they are. Like it, let's see, it's been a minute since I've done one of these, so I'm a little bit rusty. Like 4 days or whatever. I think it actually is longer than that. 5 days. Anyway, but the Parinama is a process, a guide for conscious awakening by uniting reflex, emotion, and logic. And that who it's for is for revolutionaries. It's people who are ready to do the most challenging and extraordinary work of shaping the world, reshaping the world, changing the world. And and how we do it is we reshape our nervous system so we can experience who and what we are with greater clarity. So it's a step-by-step process to, resolve for, like, fear, dullness, like, feelings of shame, low self-worth, confusion. It's tapping back into that. And so when I'm talking with somebody whose primary focus has to do with, like, very, like, really, things that are really important at certain stages of life, like very householder stuff, like, I'm advising somebody on things that have to just do with, like, very standard day-to-day professional leadership stuff, that it's like to talk to them about what parinama is as it's represented or as it's arising for me is there's like a lack of congruence. And that was something yesterday that I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting that this is hard to explain. And so it's like the decision of, do I explain it? Which I actually opted kind of not to. So, I mean, that's something that I think is an area that like, for continued refinement with me. And the thing that was I originally knew that each of these stages was gonna take longer than a week to be really dedicated on, and that already seemed like a lot when I first started thinking about it, but it takes a while. Takes a little while to give dedicated time and attention to and realize the work that needs to be done. So for me, that is what has been kind of the slowdown, but I really, I feel separated from doing readings because it's part of my own process. So I'm gonna read it's a little bit ahead. Did have a conversation last night about collaboration because the next stage, once we're articulating our vision and our mission as it relates to our project, it's about beginning to think about who gets called in to be part of building it with you and in like what capacity. So I'm going to read this and then I'm going to see kind of like what's left to possibly discuss. There's a exercise, the building the dream team. And this is kind of like a setup in terms of considerations. And these are considerations that come from really, my own experience, for like that have to do with not just what's happening in this moment, but kind of like the consequences of moving too quickly and scratching specific itches with calling people in before you have clarity about, about your vision. So bringing in people too early, there's going to either have to be a concession that they're going to be able to play a role in shaping the vision, or that it's going to be clear with them about like who is actually the kind of captain, compensation, expectations, timing, all that kind of stuff. Let's read and let's see what's left to discuss. So, collaboration should not come at the expense of realized leadership. A team of talented creators in a professional kitchen makes incredible meals that would be difficult to create alone, but it all happens under the singular vision of the chef. Even though it's collaboration, the chef is responsible for the overall meal and takes the hit for any failure. It's a clear vision. If a clear vision is not formed and articulated, and if boundaries and roles are not communicated, the collaborative process results in too many cooks in the kitchen. When there's a shared vision and collaboration, the roles and responsibilities need to be defined and understood. A funny thing is I wrote that before seeing the bear which is, if you know, you know. Um, that was actually inspired by having worked in a kitchen, but mostly knowing people that taught me about this aspect of like how a kitchen operates. So, the fourth hub stage of creation involves enrolling other people when the time is right. Enrolling others too soon before the vision is crystallized enough, or when there's a lack of personal confidence, can be a crutch that interferes with the ability to. Oh, that's a typo. Wait, where is that? To stand on one's own. The too many cooks problem is solved through confident leadership and clear direction for everyone within a group. So I'm going to give two examples about this. One of them is building organizations and in growth companies. So one of the, so in my career, I have built multiple sales organizations, revenue organizations, customer success organizations in companies that have a technology, and I build the organization from the ground up, which is a kind of specific thing. And one of the mistakes that happens in that, so my model is that I actually do a lot of the selling initially to figure things out as quickly as possible about like what really works, where are the sweet spots in terms of the opportunities to to build some momentum, and who are the right types of people to sell to, and who are the types of people we need to hire that are going to connect. Do they have industry expertise? Are there sort of personality traits in a particular industry? All sorts of things about like who is going to work in this. Is this going to be high volume? So you need people that are really super disciplined and process oriented. Does this require a lot of creativity and people who are, really able to operate but with a lot of autonomy, but stay really directed? There's a lot of different types of personalities and traits and skills and things to consider, because if you hire people too early, you can hire the wrong people, and it's really disruptive to them, because what happens is they wind up sort of taking the fall for being the wrong fit and feeling like responsible somehow for that. And so moving too fast is actually, I think, kind of can cause harm for people, because if you're unclear and you're like, I'm just going to throw this against the wall and see if it'll stick, um, the people who don't stick feel like there's some, can be left holding the bag in terms of feeling like there's some shortcoming. So the remediation for this is either to do as much legwork to get as much clarity as you can yourself, or to be really transparent with people. Both are hard. The easier mode is to kind of enroll people in and kind of like watch, and then like let other people take the fall. There's another example of this, and this happened with Parinama, which was at the beginning of this project, before it really existed and before it was very like when it was barely crystallizing. I brought some people in, and we started like having meetings, and we were all on different pages, and it was like very distressing, because for me, the project was in such a unformed state, and the amount of just grist, it was just like the amount of just kind of like everybody sort of not exact, like everyone having a different idea of what it was supposed to become. um if like, truth be told, if didn't have experience building things and realize how disruptive and hard things can be, and just like how really like kind of big, disappointments can happen, and that you kind of proceed forward regardless and just iterate and change. And then I would have been like, I might have been totally like taken just given up or like walked away from it because it was like it felt really validating to me to have other people working on it with me. I felt less alone, and it made me feel like I was actually doing something. Like, when it was, like, in that 7th, 6th hub where it's still very sort of ephemeral and, like, it's like it's coming into clarification, and it's like this really uncomfortable space, for at least for me to exist in, that it was like having other people involved made me feel like, "Oh, yeah, we're doing this thing. We're doing something. We're doing something." And as a result, it was just really like there were like expectations in terms of like things like compensation and ownership. My attorneys had warned me about this. So I was clear. Actually, this was doing something right. I was very clear and communicated very upfront about like how I saw things. And for one person, that was really like upsetting for them. Um, Oddly enough, they were kind of preferred nothing versus, like, what I was offering, which was just, I think, kind of, you know, whatever, but, and that was, like that led to just, like, a very clear, like, determination of misalignment, and it was kind of like a thing where I was like, what this is about, which is that, like, being able to kinda, like, stay the course in a, like, relatively solitary state of clarity is hard, and the temptations to call people in just so you have company while you're doing stuff, like, while you're building stuff, while you're trying to get clear, um, like, I really understand, like, where that comes from, and there was, and the other person um, just had a very different idea than where I was at with it, and there was just this conflict about, like, well, who is the person who is steering this? And through just it's just one of those things where it's like, um, I didn't see this going in the direction of being like exactly like yoga, another sort of like yoga style, and so there was misalignment there. And the thing was that luckily, it disrupted relatively quickly. Like, the disruptions because I mean, I guess now I'll give myself some credit on this, is that I was very clear, like, I presented expectations and what I thought things were early on, which led to disruption, whereas I think actually the comfort of having people working with you and kind of doing that could lead that to go on longer where you're creating more momentum, and then it's kind of harder to, like, disassemble and to go your separate ways. So, that was a very short, early, part of Parinama. So, so I think one of the things with this is being just really careful, like, the duty of care as a leader, like, as you're, like, realizing that if you were to bring people in to build what even if it's, like, to have an editor, even if it's just to have people, like, part-timers or people helping out with stuff, is realizing this is leadership, and as a leader, there's duty of care for people and, the consideration and in that, the fact that there might be, like, to be clear with people, the misalignment might lead to being unlikable or being disliked or whatever. So, okay, so I'll keep reading. So, other people are essential because there are things that you don't know how to do, and there are people you can help who can help you do them. The first time I read the pages of the Parinama Methods manuscript after my editor had worked on them, I felt a satisfaction like looking out a newly cleaned window. For some folks, it can be all too easy to forget the people who provided early support and inspiration and to undermine their important role. Suppose people are brought in early and contribute to creating the vision or to solidifying your confidence. Without clear expectations, it will only be a matter of time before confusion and resentment emerge. This is a caution for both the visionaries and the folks who get enrolled too early. Each person's specific contribution and focus will need to be determined relatively early on and will need to be revised periodically to avoid misunderstandings that eventually can become destructive to the project. This can feel like a buzzkill in the moment, but it's an important investment in the long-term viability of key relationships. Keep in mind that having difficult but important conversations is another opportunity for growth and transformation. Yeah, and it's hard, like, and I wanna like, I wanna honor the fact that those conversations are really are particularly hard because there is a vulnerability and a delicateness at this stage of creation, which having any kind of disruption or disagreement can feel, um it can be really uncomfortable. Um, yeah. And can and actually can create, like, can what so, the words can, like, shake your confidence a little bit. So you just have to give yourself the, little time. It's interesting. Okay, so enrolling others in a project without a clear compensation plan can be unintentionally predatory when the right balance of compensation and recognition is not established. "We'll figure it out later" from the leader, and "it doesn't matter, I trust you" from the enrollee are both time bombs. The trusting person will expect more than the leader intends to give, and the initial excitement will wear off as the practicalities of the work set in. When this happens, it's not the time or place to figure this stuff out. These incubating conflicts tend to erupt when projects become challenging, as they eventually do, often at the cost of derailing progress at a critical time in the growth of the venture. A time when surfacing complex dynamics can have damaging consequences to a project's success. If they're not caught early, resentment and the feeling of being taken for granted grow and are hard to resolve. So, yeah, so this is a callback to what I was just discussing. And so I guess one of the things I would say is that my experience early on with Parinama was the result of having had, quite a bit of experience with this in my professional life for, like, what are the 15, 20 years that I've spent building teams. Um, there's a lot of initial excitement when the group gets together because on some level, like, there's this sense of, like, "We can do anything." And part of the creating and building process is being able to weather the densification from "we can do anything" to what you actually do. It's kinda similar to that standing at the, 32 flavors of ice cream, and it's like, "We can have any ice cream we want." And then eventually, you're standing with your cone of pistachio. Like, eventually it has to, it's like, you could be like, stay in the field of possibility forever and just be like, "It's so exciting to think on some level I'm tasting every flavor and imagining it." But to actually have the experience of eating ice cream, it needs to actually be consolidated into, a densified reality. So part of the thing of enrolling people and providing leadership for them is being able and being at least conscious of your role in ferrying people through this process with consideration for them and their humanity. So it's the balance of realizing, like, I'm, it's like the head chef, but also their the the contributions of other people make the vision possible. But there are these very particular roles that we have. So, and compensation. I'm wondering, it's funny because there's like very little. I'm going to read this last section, then I'm going to talk more about this, if it's not in here. So there's a period in the process of creation that is singular, even if your venture involves another early stage creator, such as a co-founder. You'll need to know how to walk alone and to be capable of tolerating imperfections, errors, and incompleteness in creating and manifesting. Something that previously didn't exist is coming into reality, so incompleteness and imperfection are unavoidable. What you create when your creation does exist in the future, you'll face people's projections and resistance to new ideas. So you'll need to be able to stand firm in representing your creation as you, and doing this early will prepare you. The time that feels lonely prepares you for the ever increasing scope of bringing something to significant numbers of people, which inevitably involves some rejection. Before you can convince anyone else, you need to make the most critical sell, your own buy-in. Yeah, actually, it's funny. I keep thinking I'm reading ahead, and then it winds up being exactly like in alignment with where I'm at. Funny thing that. Okay, so the part I'm going to point back to is about compensation. So there's got to be somewhere in here because I really remember like being like, "This is a point that has to be made." Um, One of the other things about enrolling people for your project is fair compensation. So, and compensation that feels fair to both parties. So, whatever kind of trade that is, whether it's money, whether it's like barter, whatever, that the expectation is clear. I have a thing where I don't negotiate for people about creative work. Whatever quote they gave me is what I pay them. And sometimes I'll pay them more. Because to me, when I'm tagging people in to help make my vision a reality, I don't want any of that feeling of them not feeling valued for their gifts and their contribution. I really want them to feel like they're really seen and appreciated, like that energy of gratitude. I want that in there. I don't want to interfere with that by being like, is there any way we can, like if it's outside of my budget, I'm just really clear about the fact that I don't feel like I'm not ready for you yet if I can't really afford you. Um, yeah, I mean, this was something it's interesting with Parinama in particular. You see this a lot with, like, stock options and companies, which is I won't go down the rabbit hole with that, about talking more about how that functions. But treating people fairly who are involved in your creation and being very conscious of that, being very conscious of your ability to give people the credit, the appreciation, and the compensation. And it's kind of like it's kind of, like one of the things about, kind of commerce and industry is it's really built on the winners being the people that like kind of get the better, like get more out of people than what they give, and you see that kind of accelerating. And yeah, like predatory arrangements. I've done them. So I'm not saying this like I'm talking about like a reformed being pretty like the enhancement of my consciousness and being more reformed about this increasingly. So it's just incredibly important when you're enrolling people to be really mindful of the impact that their involvement will have on them to the extent that you can. And it's not that you can, like, be making decisions for them, but what you can be doing is being transparent about your understanding of where things are and what your expectations are and what you realistically see as the compensation and the exchange for the work that's done. So I'm not saying like you're like reaching into their life and trying to figure out how to like make decisions for them. It's giving them the material so that they can, with like whatever capacity they're at, make the right decisions for themselves. So this is a real preamble as is like leading up to the next exercise, which is building the dream team. So this is like all the cautionary measures before we talk about, okay, let's call people in. So, this is like probably kind of reads as more like the Debbie Downer side, which is like, like, it's like, oh yeah, you can't, don't take advantage of people when you're doing this. Don't get people all excited about something that's actually just like great for you and, whatever. And listen, I don't know that there's any such thing as a completely balanced like deal or but like it's to at least aspire towards balance, to at least aspire towards it, to be conscious of it. Because I've certainly, I can't, I certainly have been like the quote unquote beneficiary of imbalanced deals. Yeah. So I'm not, this is not this, like, as much as this is reading, like, potentially is like a high horse kind of position. It's, kind of lessons continuing to be learned and iterated on. So next exercise will be the, building the dream team. And we're going to talk about this notion that's been alluded to earlier, which is about the reality that who you are, who you become is to build something is a combination of your own transformation and also calling in people that can like fill in and elevate and like grow your vision and make and bring it into reality, that have talents that are collaborative with yours and that work together to create like incredible things. And as a shout out, I think I've talked about this a little bit in an earlier session on this, but with Parinama Method, this book is extraordinary. Like, this is a magnificent book. It's massive. It's really well written. It's beautifully organized, beautifully designed. In terms of it, it's like super readable. Like, it's like, and part of the thing was, full disclosure, I'm just going to put a little note in here, is that I knew the density of it. Really, my vision with it was that I knew, and still is a matter at hand, is like the intensity of what this contains would require that it has this accessibility in terms of how it's organized, so that it's like built into, sections and pieces that are individually consumable, and also that would be beautiful. And that was part of the, that was definitely something that I really felt and understood very clearly. And the people that did that, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to write a book. Allison Lowander, my editor, did like transform me. She helped me find my voice. She helped me understand how to like tap into that. She was so, she just like cut things out that I was really attached to. I just trusted her completely. Like rearranging things, just just absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. It's like as much her book as it is mine, truly. And then also Sheila Parr, who is the designer. So the beautiful cover, the colors, layout, illustrations. That like that, I'm going to just stop there for, there's so many people that like are like, there's no, we don't do anything alone, but I think to do really extraordinary things, it's about really drawing in other, like other like extraordinary creators that can like Yeah, because it's kind of like I wanna, because it's funny thing, like, okay, one more thing. So you're like, "I want to write a book." So one thing is, like, who you have to become in that process, but there's also the thing that that's a bit of a misnomer because you're never gonna nobody's ever written a book. Like, they had editors, they had printers, they had, all of the everything that came together, inventors of language, teachers who taught us words, people who, readers. Like, what's the point of a book without a reader, you know? Um, Artists, people who make typefaces, people who make paper, people who print books, people who wrote the books that inspired the thinking that created the writing in the book. So the thing is, like, I wanna write a book is basically like I want to enter into an enormous collaboration. Anything you create is basically, I just want to enter into, like, an enormous collaboration, and that for this particular creation, I am going to captain this ship, but there's going to be, boat builders and lumber harvesters and fish swimming around in the ocean and weather that I can't predict and, and people swabbing the decks and managing the sails and, I mean, cooking the meals, all this kind of stuff. It's like you're the captain and, you know, and it's like, okay, maybe there's a little bit of glory in that, but ultimately, as per this discussion, it's a responsibility for other beings and humanities and creations. So, all right, that's it for now. I think that kind of nails it. So, thank you. And next time we'll read the exercise the dream team. And thank you for coming along. I appreciate you so much. Bye for now.